All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's Board of Education meeting. This is a work session in which Dr. Valenti will present to the board and the community our strategic priorities. And before I go further into my president's report, I would like to welcome back our Vice President, Lori Giacobi.
Welcome back, Lori. Glad to have you.
While she was absent for the dais, she was definitely working behind the scenes, so she really wasn't missed. She has a considerable amount of dedication to this board, and her work was very helpful, even while she was pregnant, even while she was out. So welcome officially back, Lori. And so before Dr. Valenti's presentation, we just have one item of business that we need to vote on. This has to deal with the approval of the district's law firm. So do I have a motion? Chrissy?
Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves the legal services contract with Gersio and Gersio for General Labor Council effective October 1st, 2024.
Great. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Matt. All in favor? Great. Motion passes. So as I advised that this is a work session of the Board of Education, there will be no public commentary at the end of the meeting. I will just ask that at the end of Dr. Valenti's presentation, that if the board members have any question, I will call on them individually. And Dr. Valenti, the presentation is all yours.
Thank you. So this, testing.
Not yet.
No?
Nope.
Testing, we on yet? Did we pay the Con Ed bill? Testing. Oh, I think everyone can hear me. Can you all hear me? My only problem is there's a load of people, I'm sure, online who cannot hear us. That's my concern. The public was not in the room, so.
It's on now.
Testing? Yes. We're good? Okay, let's move it along. So this is a proud moment in the annual Eastchester life of our schools, the introduction of new faculty. The community knows we go through a very rigorous process. I'll recite it very briefly. At the building level, and our building principals and some assistant principals are here. They do a very serious search with respect to all applicants for a particular position. As you know, we had a larger number of positions available this year for a few reasons. Number one, we did have an incentive retirement program. Many of our senior faculty took advantage of it. And by the way, that extends into this current school year. So in November, December, we will be announcing some additional faculty who choose to retire. But the building leaders, after we advertise on Frontline and BOLAS, do bring in available candidates, they go through the resumes, and they select a certain number to be interviewed by a committee. And that committee works diligently. They not only interview, they do look for performance assessments, they do look for other evidence of effective teaching, and then we require that they recommend 2 finalists up at the central administrative level. And normally, folks like Jeanette Messina or Jill Post or other central administrators, depending on the nature of the position, would be involved in that process, and then the appointment is made. So all of the individuals tonight have come through that process, and we're very pleased to introduce them to the board and the community by school. We'll also talk, as Christine said, about some priorities tonight, some results that we're, again, proud of with our students with disabilities and our ELs in terms of the recent ELA tests, a quick look at enrollment, and then some state initiatives. But let us begin with our youngest students, our K-1 students. And Caitlin, would you join us? And Jeanette Messina, would you announce who's here from Waverly? And we'll make it a Kodak moment. How about that? Why don't you join us? Yeah, David, come on.
Good evening, everyone. This is a really exciting day. I think, at least for me, it is, because we spent so much time over the summer interviewing, and it was exciting and challenging. And I think we really came up with a great crew, and I'm very proud of the work everyone has done. So let's begin. So we're starting with Waverly. Okay, we have with us here today Matthew Horn, elementary education. Margarita Prespatino, elementary education. Emily Sardo, elementary education. Matthew Stern, he's a physical education teacher and also a coach. He has a game tonight, so he was unable to join us. And Alexis Vaca, she's an elementary education teacher as well, and also unable to attend this evening.
So why don't we do a Kodak moment? Michael, where do you want to share? Yeah, come on. Put the principal in the center. Yeah, you stay in the center. All right. Come to the teachers over here. That's fine. It's always good to be next to Caitlin. Thank you, Michael.
Our next building, Ann Hutchinson School.
I think we have the principal and the assistant principal. Laura.
So we have here today Aurelis Rodriguez, our FLES teacher. Francesca Carlo, elementary education teacher. Ansley Davis, teaching assistant. Unfortunately, she was unable to attend this evening. We have Ariella Hecht, elementary education teacher. Shannon Kirwan, elementary education teacher. And Mackenzie Hoffman, who's also shared with Greenville, and she's a music teacher.
Principal to the center. You got a large team there. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and next is Greenville. We have with us here today Joanna Napolitano, the principal. Sinise. Old habits die hard. Okay, we have with us here today Nicole Calabro, elementary education teacher. Emma DeRosa, elementary education teacher. Franceschini, elementary education teacher. Allison Linnen, music teacher. Paola Pelosi, FLES teacher. Anna Sancia, elementary education teacher. And Mark Spinelli, physical education teacher. Unfortunately, he was unable to attend this evening. He too is coaching.
Okay, let's do it. Principal here. You got a good shot, Michael?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And next up is the middle school. And we have Madeline LeBeau here, principal. And we have Elizabeth Delamonica. She is a special education teacher. Unfortunately, she was unable to attend this evening. We have Carolyn Keenan, science teacher. Demetra Loros, reading teacher. Craig McDonald, science teacher. Siobhan Noonan, school psychologist. Amanda Paternak, teaching assistant. Kristen Perch, English teacher. Tracy Sullivan, teaching assistant. Christopher Yackel, teaching assistant. And Julia Walpole, physical education teacher, shared with the high school. She was unable to attend this evening.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, Michael.
Okay, and last but certainly not least, Eastchester High School. And we have Mr. Chris Welch here with us
Hello,
today.
Mr. Chris Welch.
Okay, we have first Adriana Orsicio, guidance counselor. Nina Barrett, mathematics teacher. Christian Clark, special education teacher. Michael Z. Gaspari, science teacher. Christina Fiorello, teaching assistant. She was unable to attend this evening. Jennifer Fratello, library media specialist. John Hatzfeld, physics teacher, science teacher. Jacqueline Canusha, guidance counselor. She was unable to attend this evening. Courtney McNally, special education teacher. Daniel Palant, science teacher, physics. He was unable to attend this evening. Kyle Wright, special education teacher. And Antoinette Spica, teaching assistant.
Want to do a correct one? We'll have to move further down. Michael, you have a wider lens here? So that's quite a number. And that brings a whole new life and vitality to your faculty. Second item on our agenda to keep it moving. Last week we reported, or last time we met, that overall our ELA and math proficiency rates are moving in the right direction. We reported in the aggregate that this past spring, our rates were extremely good. What I'd like to show to you tonight is that when we look at our Ls, we disaggregate the data. This is a group of youngsters who are not native English speakers. And we're very proud of the fact that over the past 3 years, if you take it from 22 to 24, you see their improvement in proficiency with ELA going to 24%. Now, the district as a whole, as of today, is at 69%, so there still is a gap. But for youngsters whose language is not English, this is a tremendous improvement, and we're moving in the right direction. In math, we're doing even better. As you can see, the improvement from the base year, 22, being at 63%, we're now in the 70% range. Last year, 72, current year, 70%. So our Ls are moving even more so in the math area, and we need work to do at the reading and the proficiency level, understandably so. We wanted to take a look at our special needs population, and for some reason they're not here. And I apologize for that, but in any event, I will say that our special needs population moved in the same direction. They improved from 22 to 24, both in ELA and in math. Appreciably more so in math, less so in ELA, which is to be expected. But again, the movement is in the right direction, so we're very proud of that. And both groups will be working closely with Jill Post and our principals in terms of our MTSS interventions, which we'll talk about momentarily, to support these youngsters even more. As you know, we have 7 strategic priorities. We've done a lot of work with Priority 1 in strengthening school security. As we enter this new year, we have 2 new goals. We want to clarify a little bit better what the role of the SRO is, the security guards, and what is the role of the administration in the school. And Chris is already working on that, as is Madeline, of course, with the shared SRO here at the middle and the high school, where I think that clarification is most critical and most necessary. For all the SROs, and we do have 4, as you know, 1 on this campus, and then on each of our elementary campuses, 3 others, we do want some additional ongoing training for our security guards and coordinating better with our SROs. Needless to say, we live at a difficult moment in history for schools. The incident in Georgia earlier this year precipitated a number of events nationally and globally, quite frankly. And some of our neighboring districts went into lockdown because of certain threats that were made. And each day that our administrators get up and go to school, they do not know, nor do our faculty, nor do our parent community know what lies ahead. So we do live at times when we are on edge, but we are prepared, and that's the important thing, that we have the right people in place, the right technologies in place, our buildings are safer, and we think that with Priority 1, we're in the best place we can be. As to Priority 2, we've not really changed that priority. It's at the heart of what we do. We talked a little bit about achievement earlier. Some new goals for this year. We're introducing the Junior Great Books program. We'd like to have a presentation later on this year to talk about that. It's going to be a pilot at the Waverly and the Ann Hutchinson School. It's a program that is in the WIN period. We've always believed that the WIN period is an important part of our elementary school life. It serves our AIS students with remediation in ELA and math. It services our IEP students with speech, occupational therapy, and other interventions. But we always were concerned about, are we giving enough to students who are proficient or mastery? And so we're attempting to look at this Junior Great Books program, and Caitlin and Laura will make a presentation later on this semester and talk about how the program works, how the curriculum is involved, what types of fiction and nonfiction are involved, and what type of reading is involved. And we want to compare the two models. Greenvale is providing a good level of services at the 2 to 5 level, and we want to look at that over the course of this year and say, what does Great Books bring that the other services don't? What do the other services bring that maybe Great Books may not have? And by the end of this year, we'll have a better idea of where we want to be next year. So it is a pilot, and it's good that we have some schools doing it. I mentioned earlier the MTSS interventions, multi-tiered student support. That is something that Jill, together with the principals, worked very hard at. We do have that in place at tiers 1, 2, and 3. And we are looking to create a profile for what is a tier 1 student, what is tier 2, what is tier 3, what is the nature of the interventions at each of those levels. And I'm very excited that we brought in a new suite of assessments at Waverly this year. As you see, Acadians. And I want to thank some of our new hires, our elementaries, particularly Dana Damiano and Caitlin at Waverly. Were very excited about bringing in Acadians. It's used in New York City, and we believe that it's going to diagnose certain areas of our first graders that will help us better leverage them as they move into Greenvale and Ann Hutch next year. A more intensive type of assessment that delivers information that is very specific and necessary for leveraging our students to really achieve the third goal. We want every student reading at the third grade level by the end of third grade. That should not be aspirational. That should be reality. Can we get there? I think we have to make every effort to do so, because if a student is able to read at grade level by the end of grade 3, the research is clear that that student has a predictably better result going from third grade right through high school. It is that reading level that is so crucial and critical to that student mastering other subject areas, be it math, science, social studies. So we need to move the needle on the proficiency rate. We need to get into the 80s on proficiency and ultimately get all youngsters as close as possible, other than the select group that are alternately assessed. But certainly we need to keep getting closer as much as we can to 100%. At grade 4, and this tiptoes into our secondary initiatives, algebra went very well a year ago. We increased our percentage rate from 40 to 70%. We had a 100% passing rate of the 70% who participated. So the question was, the students were ready to do it. They were ready for the challenge. The teachers stepped up and made sure that our students were ready for the challenge and were, quite frankly, successful at the challenge. And it is something that demonstrates that giving youngsters more challenging courses, the opportunity, not insisting they have to be there, but the opportunity. And don't forget, we had the parental waiver. Parental waiver said, You didn't select my child, I want him or her to try algebra. Parental waiver also said you did select my child, and I don't want my child for reasons of anxiety or other possibilities. So with that waiver, those increased numbers of students did perform extremely well, and we're anticipating the same with earth science. Our teachers are ready to accept that challenge. Now, we are providing extra supports, and there are extra staffing for this. So when we talk about additional students, we're talking about additional support. Some of these youngsters are getting an intense dosage of either algebra or earth science regions. That means in addition to meeting every day over a 6-day cycle, so 6 40 to 45-minute periods, certain youngsters are getting 9 periods. So they're getting that extra support, which gets them into that point of being at the proficiency level. Let's talk a little bit about high school. We want to increase our enrollment, and that is happening in more rigorous courses. We talked a lot about this last year, and we're going over a 3-year period. We're seeing progress with increased advanced placement participation rates, improved percentages of students who are scoring at 3 or better on the AP tests, and an increased student enrollment in regions and honors courses. We've managed to reduce the number of non-regions courses, and the argument that I think is a solid one to make is that the regions ought to be the default option for our students, that every student should be able to complete a regions regimen as long as the regions remain in play, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But that our students are capable of doing that, except, again, for those who, by parental option or for alternative assessment reasons, are not going to be involved in that endeavor. Another major effort that's being made right now at the high school level, and it may involve the middle school to some degree, Chris Welch is organizing a committee at the high school level to take a hard look at the 9-period schedule. We've had discussions, the board will recall, and the community will recall last year about options to a 9-period schedule. There are different ways of looking at it, and we did look at some alternative approaches, the block schedule being one. We talked about trying to integrate an advisor period, as you will recall. We also talked about integrating extra help within the school day as opposed to the end of the school day. So all of those are on the table, plus perhaps other options. But it'll be a broad-based committee. I'm advised students, teachers, certainly there'll be parental involvement so that everyone has something to say about what that final schedule ought to look like. And then likewise, the middle school will evaluate it from its own perspective. And lastly, the issue has come up several times. Why aren't we one of the top 100 high schools, U.S. News and World Report? And the simple answer is I think we are. We simply need to do a little bit more in that AP world and get more youngsters at the participation level, and we will continue to monitor that piece of data. Priority 3, K-12 counseling. You will recall we did the Tri-States a few years ago. We're working with those recommendations. Both Chris Welch and Dr. Bill Meyer are collaborating on implementing K-12 counseling, working closely with our counselors in terms of metrics that Tri-State suggested we look at, impact on the academics. One of the innovative programs that we have this year, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure we'll have presentations, is the linkage of our English department working with our guidance counselors on the essay. And that was initiated last year, it continues into this year. And most recently, both Brian Johnson, the chair of the English department, and Heather Riley, the chair of guidance, suggested that they would like to make a presentation this fall so that the board gets an idea of what exactly that package includes and its impact on college readiness and career readiness. Our fourth priority are unmet facility needs. As you know, last year we began the study. We felt it was an important start. We'd like to continue that study this year. We'd like to focus on the classroom. I'm happy to report that we did find enough funds for between last year and current year to bring technology up to a fairly healthy standard within the Eastchester School District. Every classroom, kindergarten through 12th grade, now has new technology in it, and teachers are very satisfied, delighted with the innovations. Students are very happy. So we're moving in the right direction with technology, but there is more to be done. As we look at our classrooms, they need more flexible, adjustable, and adaptive furniture based on the differing sizes of students, ages of students, methodologies of teaching, ranging from K right up through the high school. So we continue to look at that, and now with a new administrative team, we'll be taking a number of building tours to reinforce exactly where the needs are at the high school, middle school, and Hutch and elsewhere. And we want to fold into that our athletic facilities as well. So we'll be reporting on that during this year as to progress. In fact, that committee will be meeting this Friday at 9 o'clock, the Facilities Committee. Strategic priority 5 is the partnerships to support student and staff mental health and emotional well-being. This district became very innovative. We appointed a new position, Dr. Bill Meyer, to the assistant to the superintendent for these services. And Bill is working very closely with all of our principals to, number one, implement year 1 of the Yale K-12 ruler program. As you recall, last year was year 0, staff training, and working with Jill Post and Bill and the administrative team, they'll be implementing and have begun that this year, and we'll be hearing more about that at a future workshop. And also, we're partnering with Southern Westchester BOCES and 10 other districts, and there is money there that they will be allocating to Eastchester to support these programs that we're putting in place. This is a new priority that we agreed we needed to separate athletics out. We needed to take a harder look at athletics, and we needed to ask what more could we do to bring athletics up competitively to our neighboring districts. And we saw a couple of areas. Number one, we said our athletic budget is adequate, but not as good as some of our competitors. And we said, can we do better? I want to show you some data in a moment on that. Right now, we're at 1.4%, and we think over the next 2 to 3 years, we ought to be at 2% of the budget, which is closer to where some of our best districts in the neighborhood are. We are working with our athletic coaches in terms of improving the recruitment, training, supervision, and evaluation, and the compensation. We're looking at that of our district coaches. Again, we don't look at just student performance in terms of being competitive there. We look at all areas, the compensation issue. We do look at the budgetary commitments, et cetera, to get us in the neighborhood of districts who we believe we ought to be aligned with. And a need for a district-wide athletic council that meets with some regularity. We now have an interim athletic director, Tom Puccini, and Tom will be working closely with us on these particular goals. Let me talk a little bit about that first goal. If you ask where is Eastchester right now from a budgetary point of view, and this analysis was done based on last year's budgets, the lowest, as you see, is 0.6%. The highest is 2.8%. Eastchester is somewhat below the median, 1.2%, the median being 1.3%. So generally, we've been around the median in a number of areas. The question is, what does that look like in real numbers? And who are the districts who are pumping higher percentages of money into their budget? And again, you could see Rhinebeck, Bronxville, Blindbrook, Briarcliff, Croton, Harmon, Hastings, et cetera, Edgemont, Rye, all of those districts, Chappaqua, you can read the list as easily as I can, and we are smack dab middle at about 20. Now, even though net gross, we're at 1.3 million, that still only is 1.2% of a 100 million plus budget. So the question becomes, what do we need to do to get closer to being competitive at 2%? And in our view, we can achieve that over the next 2 or 3 years, and be very careful about how we're using those resources in terms of uniforms, in terms of expanded teams, in terms of the expansion that we did just this year with our conditioning program going to the middle school, and the additional teams that we've added. Priority 7, this is new as well as a result of the fact that the state has now decided they will no longer continue at APPR as an evaluation system either for teachers or administrators. So in effect, we need to develop programs that are consistent with the New York State Standards-Based Educator, Evaluator, and Support Plan. Those goals mean we have to design better evaluation systems, actionable improvement plans, one of which we are talking about right now is the mentoring program for administrators that the board will be approving at their next regular meeting. We also will be meeting tomorrow with some partners from LIU about the potential for advanced programs in the doctorate neighborhood for administrators. So we are looking on several fronts to improve our actionable improvement plans. Leadership collaboration, certainly, what more can we do in order to strengthen our administrative team and give personalized learning opportunities with our teachers as well. You met a number of wonderful teachers this evening. How do we retain these teachers? How do we help them grow? And in working with LIU, we've come up with a couple of potential programs that we'll be revealing over the next several weeks and months. So it's all about growth. Enrollment, the story very simply is that there's a slight decline. It's what our demographers predicted. If you look at September, we dipped below 3,000. We're at 2,960. Some days it's 2,955. Some days it's 2,952. Some days it goes a little bit higher. So you can see Waverly is at 427 pupils. If you look at kindergarten, we took in 190, which is below what we normally do, and we graduated 277 seniors. So you can do the math on that in terms of the net reduction. Ann Hutch is at 441 and Greenvale at 463. Our middle school is at 700 and the high school is at 929. So the logical question is, well, how does this compare to last year? What happened? And there we have it in form that is, I think, pretty clear. Our enrollment in kindergarten went from 228, which has been pretty standard in the 220 neighborhood, down to 190. Is it a demographic blip, or will it come back up over 200? Our demographers say there's going to be a steady decline. You may see future kindergartens climb over the 200 neighborhood, but in general, you're going to be seeing fewer students entering the district. You can look at the other grade levels as well, but at the elementary level, net, you're talking about 36 fewer pupils this year than we had last year. When you lose them at different grade levels, it doesn't necessarily mean you can reduce a teacher. A few students here and a few students there, those does not necessarily mean an entire position. So fortunately, the enrollment drop is not dramatic, but it is something to keep an eye on. At the middle school, we dropped about 30 youngsters as well. You can see that very simply at the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. 7th is way up, but the other grades are down enough, particularly the 8th grade, for a net loss of 31. And when you look at your high school, again, we were at 962 last year. We're at 929 this year, again about 33 students drop. And you saw last year's graduating class, which was huge. With that group graduated and 190 coming in, you would almost anticipate that we lost about 100 students, or a net reduction of 3%. I'll wrap up with what's going on at the state level. I mentioned APPR. I mentioned that Governor Hochul is looking at a cell phone policy we're keeping an eye on. We don't want to take any steps here beyond what our current practice and policies are until we find out where the state is at. The State Education Department has unveiled a Pathways to Graduation, which in effect is going to reduce the number of current diplomas from 3 to 1 diploma. And we'll talk more about that. I'll be making a presentation on that at a future workshop. In effect, they're looking to set some criteria for literacy and math, expectations for students, and that bleeds into regionalization. This is another initiative that is taken that you'll be hearing about through your NISBR contacts throughout the state. All of the BOCES regions are doing surveys of their individual districts. They're assessing what our resources are on different components, be it the academic component, social, mental health, and your budgetary resource component. And the ultimate intent is, number one, identify what the resources are amongst and between all the districts. Number two, how can those resources be shared amongst and between districts? Whether or not it will lead to questions of consolidating smaller districts into larger districts is another question which becomes highly politicized, but at this point that's not being discussed. What's being discussed is what does exist in those 3 domains that I mentioned, and to what degree can we report on that. November is a time that we will be reporting. So on that note, I thank the board and invite any questions you may have. Matt?
Site, Dr. Lundy, thank you. There was a lot there in the presentation this evening, so if everyone will bear with me, I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. And I want to start with one of our strategic priorities, safety and security. I think everyone knows for the past several years with the investments in SROs and security guards, the safety of our students and staff is paramount. That is a priority that we've established that we will continue to invest in and tweak as you suggest here. One thing that strikes me about our safety and security is as our building level administrators were getting up, and welcome to all of our new teachers and staff here in Eastchester, by the way. And I look at Mrs. Mondelli and Mrs. Sinisi and Mrs. Capiello and Mr. Welsh and Mrs. LeBou. I think it's very important to publicly state for the community that the safety and well-being of our students starts with our building level administrators. And they're working in conjunction with the SROs and with security in the buildings. And I will say, as I sit here as a trustee and as a parent, there is no group of professionals that I would trust more with my own children every day than the individuals that are here tonight. So first, I just want to publicly state that because I know we're always talking about the SROs and security. It really starts with our building level administrators. So thank you guys for the job that you're doing. Dr. Lundy, one of the numbers that I noticed specifically for math with ELL, and I'm just wondering if we have any additional information there, is we went from, I believe, 72% down to 70 or 73 to 70 from
There was a slight decline from 23 to 24, 2%.
Yep. Do we know, is there, I mean, just in terms of the number of ELL learners, is that 1 or 2? Is it just kind of a mathematical, somewhat of an anomaly, or do we know why that went down?
It's no more than 1 or 2 students.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, I mean, because our total N in ENL is only in the neighborhood of about 100 to 130. So a few students here or there can tick it either way, yeah.
Great.
But still, if you're in the 70% range, that's a good place to be. We think we can do better with the Ls in math. The real work with the Ls will be getting their ELA scores higher.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to mention as well that you touched on was the Great Books program and the WIN period. And I know as we've done coffee and conversation and we talked to folks in the community, more structure around the WIN period, I think is something that we're all striving for. And I will say, for those of you that know me, I have kids in a bunch of different buildings. I was fortunate enough to be at the Ann Hutch open house this past week, and Mrs. Cappiello, again, even though she did it in one of our retreats, spoke a little bit about Great Books and the WIN period. Thank you for bringing that to our district as a pilot, because I do think from an enrichment perspective and from just further defining that WIN period, I think that's a great start. It sounded great. And I think, however, no pun intended, right? It sounded great, Great Books. However we can expand upon that, I think that would be fantastic. So as we're looking at advancing academic outcomes as a goal, I think that's a great program. So thank you for bringing that to us. I'm excited to hear more, learn more, and see how that pilot's going. So thank you for that. With athletics, one thing that I did want to note is when we look at kind of where we're ranking at 20th based on a percentage of the budget, but in terms of what we're spending on athletics, we're ranking 3rd. So I just want to make sure, publicly that everyone understands we're striving to do more. Personally, my family athletics is super important. All of my kids play sports. Just in terms of looking at this, it looks like we're way, way down on the list, but from an actual amount that we're spending, we're actually 3rd or maybe 4th, give or take a couple of dollars, if you compare us to, I guess, Blind Brook. So just to put that in perspective, clearly that needs to be a goal for us, but in terms of the dollars that we're spending, percentage-wise, we're ranking lower, but dollar-wise, we're spending somewhat competitively to the other districts by ranking 4th. So just again, just want to bring that up.
It's a good observation, because what you could do is look at a per-pupil expenditure too, per-athlete expenditure, and all of the state would take a very interesting look then if we use the 800 athletes and use the number that we're currently using. Percentage of the budget is one way to look at it. Another way that I could work with some of our folks on is let's look at a per-athlete.
Dr. Linda, I think that would be a great idea, specifically with the athletic council that we've established, is to take a look at what that is per athlete and see how we're comparing there. So just wanted to make a notation of that. And then finally, in terms of the enrollment numbers, you may know this, Dr. Valenti, but I think that enrollment decrease is the majority of that decrease, when we're looking at in aggregate, it's about 100 students. Is that predominantly just people moving out of the district versus them sending their children to private schools and remaining in the district? I think in some of the numbers that we've discussed, the majority, I would imagine, is just general population decrease versus them opting out, because it looked like those numbers were actually better.
I think if you focus on the 190, I think you're dealing with certain demographic trends that go beyond Eastchester, lower birth rate that we're experiencing in general. So that 190 sticks out because normally we're 200 plus, and that really is an aberration from the norm. Some of the others are the normal attrition, the comings and the goings. But this is not totally unexpected. When we did our demographic study initially when I got here, they did predict that there would be a slight decline. So there are national forces at work in terms of the demographics and the mixture there. And then there might be certain trends within the district. We did lose more than we should have lost to the private schools last year, quite frankly. That was an aberration, if you recall. We had one 8th grade that was very low. We hardly lost anyone, and then a year later, that went up again. Hopefully, this current 8th grade at the middle school, we'll be able to hold most of them. I know when we did do the survey, and Madeline is here, the findings we got from the families who did respond is that, there were legacy issues for going to some of the private schools here. There were reasons of athletics, the scholarship issue, although being a taxpayer, to some degree we are a scholarship place. But the private schools are becoming more competitive in many ways. So that's something we have to work harder at, that out-migration between 8th and 9th grade. I don't think we're losing too many from 5th to 6th, but generally that's another place where there might be some diminution, but it's mostly your 8 to 9.
Thank you, Dr. Lonnie.
Yeah.
Great presentation, thank you very much. So I wanted to just get clarity around a couple of things. It sounded like that at some point after, I think Caitlin and Laura will kind of pull together a presentation for what their assessment has been on grade books, the junior grade books. But then, but there's also, it sounded like there was going to be a little bit of understanding of best practices maybe that Greenville has in place, and maybe a collaboration of kind of taking best of breed and maybe a melding or maybe not.
I don't want this to appear to be a contest.
Right, no.
I want it to be clear that programmatically, we're proud of what we're doing at both schools. We think what Greenville is doing is very valuable, and certainly Joanna will be part of that presentation to say, well, here's what we're doing. Laura will say, well, here's what we're doing. And then I think we need to look at both of those and say, what is the value added of great books, and what are we currently doing at Greenville, and is there an amalgam between the two that we want to look at? I think the key issue that we're trying to address is that there is a level of concern, to some degree legitimate, that some youngsters in grades 2 to 5 are not necessarily getting systematic interventions on a regular basis. And parents are not necessarily hearing that something went on a particular day. One day could be great, another day, oh, well, we did our homework, okay? So I think what we're trying to address is that every win period, on every school day, something very legitimate is happening instructionally and students are learning. The Great Books program, we predict, has a systematic curriculum with resources and books that students take home. So it has a built-in feedback mechanism that mom and dad sitting at home know something went on in school at that Great Books class. We need that same feedback loop at the Greenville School in terms of this went on today, be it small group reading, be it other types of interventions, all of which are good. I think we need to strengthen the feedback loops in general, and then look at the programs at large and decide where does each Chester want to go going forward. Okay, so it's a legitimate experiment in the sense that one school, a couple of schools, K-5, in this case Waverly, are looking at one program, and Greenville is looking at the current delivery of services delivered in the most effective way. And they'll certainly be in a position, the principal says, to say, to present somewhere mid-year when we have a good handle on what's going on and we get some feedback. And we ought to do some parental surveys too and get some feedback from that point of view, and the normal chatter in the community, do some teacher surveys. So I think if you're going to do a good action research project, which we don't do enough of in education, we can find out a lot about these programs, their efficacy, their value, and where should we be next year.
Oh, that's great. That makes perfect sense. What was interesting is around the, one of our priorities being making sure students by grade 3 are reading at grade 3. Maybe you don't have the statistic, but where are we at now? Like in terms of students that are leaving the 3rd grade and not at grade level?
I use the word aspirational. It is a national goal that all students should be reading at grade level by the end of grade 3. because reading is so absolutely essential to performance across all subjects, right? That said, where are we at this point? If your proficiency rate for your district as whole is at about 69% right now, and you want to drill down and say, well, where are your third graders, where are your fourth graders? They're around that median, all right, or that mean, somewhere between 74, 75% and 65%, right? 75% is still not 100%, right? But some of the grades are above that 69, some are below. So the idea is, let's move that 69 closer to 80% for all students. Now, once you're at 80, you're going to have a certain percentage above that number, 85, and a certain percentage below. Will you ever be at 100? No. No, because we do have students at different levels of capability. We have students who are alternatively assessed, and you can call on Jill Post, and she can talk to you about the serious, issues that certain youngsters have in terms of communication skills. So, will it ever be 100%? No, that could be a nirvana. But we should be closer to 100% than 69. That's the argument, all right? You also have a fairly growing, substantial population of non-native English pupils. So they're trying to catch up. You see their math scores are better. The cognitive abilities are there. If you administer cognitive ability tests to these students, they're way off the charts, many of them. Their problem is the language issue, okay? So the capacity is there. That's where the mathematical skills show better than the ELA skills.
I'm really like impressed with also I'm calling it the algebra for more, where we increase the number of, the opportunity to have students take in the 8th grade to take algebra, and the opt-in, increasing from 40% to 70%. I mean, that's huge.
Yep.
It's huge, the opportunity.
In terms of more students taking more challenging courses.
This has been like
Right.
thought in my side for
Right.
so many years that it's really great.
It's a huge philosophical shift, all right?
Yeah.
It's believing that more students can achieve, all right? We're not quite at all students should be taking AP courses, but certainly more students should be taking AP courses. And if they only get a 3, that's okay. In fact, if they get a 2, that might be okay. You know why? Because they've been challenged with a more difficult curriculum, and they've had an opportunity of prestige of being in an AP course and of working harder, right? So I think philosophically we have to think about education a little bit differently and say, how do we open those doors as much as possible? Not that everybody can walk into that particular portal, but certainly more can. And our question becomes, how many more can we bring in to an AP, an honors level, okay? Upper level, more rigorous courses, algebra regions, earth science regions. Questions are raised about acceleration. Should we be doing more acceleration at the middle school level? Certainly at the high school level, we're doing that. Questions have come up in the community in that neighborhood, and I think we need to embrace those questions this year and look into them.
And I'm also interested in hearing the feedback from the college essays being kind of joined with guidance and the English department to have those students start to really, understand what's that topic they're going to challenge themselves with writing a critical essay for college acceptance.
Yeah, the focus on personalization, who are you? What is there something about you that is unique as you probe into yourself that is worthy to be written about and makes you unique in the stratosphere of, the college world, all right? So that focus helps students on many levels to think more deeply about themselves, their personal lives, what they've done, and who they are. So that's going on as well.
Just lastly, I don't think you mentioned BOCES in terms of allotments, but I think we've increased there too, haven't we, in terms of?
The trend is this way.
Correct, right,
3 years ago, we were at 40.
right.
We're about 52 to 55, I think, right now. 52, Chris? Sorry? 52 BOCES right now, or 53?
Which is
40 to 53. There's a whole movement in terms of career technical education. And that will be, I said there's going to be one diploma. That will be one of the diplomas that I think is going to be very close to where Eastchester is at. All right, to have that seal or endorsement in terms of career technical, as well as the regions, which will be available, and they may want to consider an advanced placement pathway as well. If they're opening doors on pathways, there are several pathways that could be open to this district: the career technical, the regions, and the advanced placement.
All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
I'm very pleased about the MTSS interventions as number 2 for student outcomes. I know that our educators and providers are doing such amazing work with the students. I personally, and I'm sure community members, would like a better understanding of exactly how the process works and how it works to select and identify the individuals. So could that be presented to the board at some point so we could have a better understanding and some clarity around that? That would be great.
Definitely. When I mentioned the Acadians, which is an evolution of the Dibbles, which has been around, those of you who are educators know that exam. Acadians is another evolution of that Dibbles exam. It all begins with the assessment. Are your assessments sensitive enough to be able to identify what the unique needs of particular students are? And then are the interventions, the tools that you're bringing, are they digging deeply enough to address what that particular need is? So we've been meeting as an administrative team, elementary administrative team in particular, talking about doing a stronger job there, what tools are available beyond more sensitive assessments, how we're looking at that data, how we're going through a third grade test, a group of teachers in the fourth grade, and saying, where did my particular class of students, what were their weaknesses, what were the ones they got wrong, and then why did they get it wrong? There could be 2 reasons. Number 1 is the curriculum reason. Well, we didn't do enough inference, okay, in that fourth grade or third grade class, and as a group, majority of our third graders or fourth graders were below level. The second possible reason could be that the student did not master the skill. So when you dig that deeply, now you're beginning to identify 2 potential targets: how to improve your program and curriculum, and what does that particular child need in a WIN period or an AIS or some combination of that. So that's another area. And then we did find in our conversation that there were certain programs where certain teachers were using them at grade levels, and we were getting more bounce, if you will, by virtue of those particular programs. So if you find something that's working at one grade level, maybe we ought to share the riches and say, let's expand that to other grade levels. So we're looking at a whole cafeteria or potpourri of approaches, and I think we'll have more to report later on this year about ways that we think we can improve performance on those tests.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? I just actually have a question, and sort of piggybacking off of what Chrissy stated about, it's wonderful that we've opened up the opportunities for students to take the algebra and the general science, earth science regions. And now the focus is really on opening up, I guess, a little bit more flexibility on the AP classes. Has that started? Have we seen, do we have any data on how many students are taking AP classes versus, in the past, would they have even been eligible for those classes?
We've started a new AP art history course. I believe we're carrying that. We have, 8 to 12 students enrolled? Is that right? So yes, there is a new AP course on the docket. We are enrolling more youngsters in advanced placement, and we can have that data for the board. Certainly, the high school has a handle on it, and probably by next month, we'll be able to give you. You have it.
Over the last 3 years, there's, almost a 15, 18% increase in the number of students taking AP classes. So the work is well underway.
Great.
So it's happening. You're looking for specific numbers. Show me the trends and show me what the numbers are.
Right.
And then, there are techniques we haven't started yet or we haven't considered yet, but we may want to take the leap and say, well, incoming freshmen take AP World History. It happens to be one of the advanced placement courses that is within the manageable area. And if you have a proper preparation coming out of 7th and 8th grade in social studies, they could be leveraged for it. You may, as a district, want to consider pre-AP courses in terms of preparation. So there are strategies afoot in order to strengthen your middle school program that prepares students for coming into the high school. And I'm not looking to segregate students. I'm saying these are programs that we want to open up to all students as much as we possibly can.
Christy?
Did you have, I was just going to say, in terms of trending, I'd be interested to see how we're trending on the earth science and the algebra. Just,
Okay.
to keep
Yeah,
that.
we can get some of that data together for our next workshop. I'll work with Madeline and Chris on some of those, the advanced placement and the earth science and algebra.
Christy?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to comment and say that I'm glad to hear that there's going to be a committee about looking at alternate schedules for middle school, high school, and I'm glad to hear that there'll be teachers and students on it as well. And we're looking forward to hearing about that because I know that there's so many different schedules and school districts are all doing so many different things. So looking forward to hearing about that. Thank you.
Okay, it's afoot. It has begun, or it's in the process of beginning, right? Yeah.
It will meet within the next month for our first meeting. Step one, of course, is identifying programmatic priorities, what our current schedule doesn't allow us to do. And then once you identify those programmatic priorities, work backwards to design a schedule around that instead of trying to just pick a schedule and shoehorn a program into it.
Jill?
Thank you. So, quick question. All of what we've heard is amazing, and we're trending in the right direction. I think you made a comment on the top 100 schools list, high schools list specifically. Although I don't necessarily put a lot of weight in those lists, I think we would all like to see East Chester on them. Do you believe that what we are doing here will put us on those lists, or are there other items that we should be focusing on? And I guess, what are the other things that are going into those determinations that we may not necessarily have been addressed?
When I was first interviewed as the interim superintendent here, one of the board members gave me a U.S. News and World Report, said, read this, would love to talk about it. I won't say who.
We know.
It's okay. And it's come up several times since, and rightly so. I mean, it's out there, it's in the public forum. Now, how much value do you put in these lists? Well, as much value as you choose to do, right? The top colleges, the top high schools, et cetera. To answer your direct question, I think East Chester ought to be there, and I think there's a pathway to being there, and I think the pathway is the advanced placement. We are moving from a system that had set up a number of blockages for students getting into upper-level courses. And philosophically, we're moving that to reducing those as much as reasonably possible, and that's what allows for recognition at the U.S. News and World Report level. Participation rates. Are you opening the windows and doors to more students? So I think that one strategy alone will begin to move the number on that, all right? Our students perform very well, but if only 40% of the students are doing, you can anticipate high levels of performance. Now, if you move it to 70 and you're still getting high levels of performance, that's a mark of real movement as a school district, okay? Now you're talking about comprehensive growth and comprehensive strength as a school district. The question is, can that 70 become 80? And how far can you push that number and still get the kinds of results that are reasonable where youngsters are being challenged? Look, we have to change the culture of our own students. It's not just the culture of teaching or the culture of leading, it's the culture of our students. Students being adolescents, if you don't challenge me and I can still get a 3.5 or a 4.0, hey guys, what's the issue? Well, you can't be in a non-Regents course anymore. You ought to be in a Regents course and need to work harder. And you want to still get the 3.5 or higher, all right? So it's changing that culture as well. And I think our students are ripe for it. I think all students are ripe for challenge. The question is, if you don't challenge them, then, they're not going to invite it. They're not going to knock on your door and say, hey, I want more challenges. I'd like to read, more challenging materials. They're going to accept what you give them. So we have to change the number of cultures here, and I think we're in the process of doing that.
Just on the challenging aspect, in terms of like if you can get, if a student is comfortable with getting a 3.5 or a 4.0 in your basic classes, why challenge yourself? And I believe we're going to be going down this path, but I think it has a lot to do, that mindset, with how our grading processes are.
That's part of it, absolutely.
Right, so I'd love at some point to understand where we are today and how we grade at the higher level, at the secondary level, maybe high school, 9 through 12. And, what else, how are of our neighboring districts, what's the logic behind the grading principles that they're leveraging there? And are we putting our students here at maybe a disadvantage because of how we're grading or where we're weighting certain finals or certain Regents exams as opposed to maybe how they're being weighted elsewhere? I'd love
So
to
doing
know
a
that.
comparative analysis of the weighting structure, et cetera, and how that's conducted, right. But if you're looking at the national trend, like we did with reading, what did we do? We went back to phonics. We went back to phonics, right? Back to phonics. Notice what your best universities are doing now. They're going back to what? The ACT and the SAT. Why? Because the transcript ain't telling me the story, folks. And that's why the essay now takes on a certain new meaning, and they're going to start looking for legitimate, nationally reliable and valid tests that they call the SAT and the ACT, because they think that that is going to tell them a better story than A's on a transcript or 4.5, because you got extra weightings. So we're going, to a prior point, and if a high school wants to start moving the needle now, we ought to be thinking about SAT and ACT prep classes within our own school in terms of preparing for where the colleges and universities are going, all right? They made the mistake, and they're acknowledging it by going back. So we have to keep an eye on that. The whole accountability thing resurfaces, and we've got to remain tiptoes on that accountability measure, okay? Schools exist for a lot of reasons, but there's one fundamental reason, that you learn to read, you learn to calculate, you learn to write at the highest levels possible, all right? Unless you become knowledgeable and expert in those areas, other measures of the school really pale next to that. If we do our central job right, then the whole person merges with that. You have the mind, you have the heart, right? You got to focus on the mind, and then you bring the heart there, and then the body. So it's those three pieces. But unless you get the mind right, that's what schooling's all about. That's why it does exist from the cognitive point of view, right? I may sound old-fashioned, but I still believe that that's what we're all about, okay? It's a competitive world out there amongst the competitive groups, okay? And we want to be in those most competitive groups. That's the goal, okay? We don't want to settle for second best. So I think we're on the right track, moving in the right direction.
Great. Any other questions? Everyone's good?
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Valenti, for that great presentation. So, right, so we are up to item 7 on the agenda. Our future meeting dates will be October 8th. That will be a regular Board of Education meeting, and on October 22nd will be a work session. And as I stated earlier, as a work session, there isn't any public comment, so do I have a motion to adjourn the work session? Jackie, do I have a second? Chrissy? Right, motion passed. Meeting adjourns. Have a, oh, sorry. Oh, I will get this right, I swear. All in favor? Great. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you. Please forget that last part.